I keep replaying that sound in my head. The first hit. Not a knock. Not a drunken stumble into the wrong door. A shoulder-driven slam that made the deadbolt groan and the frame flex like it was made of cardboard. It was 3:07 a.m., the kind of hotel quiet where you can hear the HVAC cycle and the ice machine down the hall. I'd fallen asleep in my jeans with my laptop on the second bed because we'd been at the client site until after midnight, and my brain was still running on caffeine and unfinished checklists. The second hit came before I even fully sat up. Wood cracked, a sharp splintering pop. Then the door bowed inward, and the safety latch snapped like a cheap bracelet. For a half-second, I honestly thought someone had the wrong room, and it was going to end with an apology and a bill. Then I heard his voice, close, hoarse, furious in a way that didn't belong in a hotel hallway. "Ethan, open the door." I didn't say anything. I didn't move toward him. I slid off the bed and put my weight behind the bathroom door instead, because I didn't know what else to do in that moment, besides create distance and think. My phone was on the nightstand, screen glowing with the time. 1 bar of signal. My thumb hovered over 911, then hesitated. Not because I didn't want help, but because I knew exactly what would happen if police got involved on a corporate trip. HR would handle it. Legal would evaluate exposure. And by the time the truth found daylight, it would be filed into some quiet folder labeled misunderstanding. He slammed again. This time the door didn't just flex, it gave. The remaining hinge screws squealed like teeth on metal. The whole frame shifted, and the door swung inward on an angle that looked wrong, like a broken arm. I finally spoke, but I kept my voice low. "Ryan, back up." A beat of silence, then a laugh that wasn't funny. "Don't do that," he said. "Don't act like you don't know what this is." That was when the cold settled in my chest, because he was right about one thing. I did know. Earlier that night, in the lobby, I'd watched him come in through the side entrance with his laptop bag unzipped and his tie loosened, moving fast like he wanted to get past the front desk before anyone asked questions. He saw me standing there with my keycard in my hand, and his whole face changed. Just for a fraction of a second, like he'd forgotten I existed, then he fixed it. That's what Ryan did. He fixed things. Smiles, stories, emails. He could turn panic into confidence in 2 seconds. He walked right up to me and lowered his voice like we were sharing a secret. "You didn't see what you think you saw," he said. I remember blinking at him, because I hadn't even spoken. I hadn't accused him of anything. And yet he'd already gone into defense mode, already trying to close a door I hadn't opened. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He smiled wider, too wide. "Come on, we're on the same team. Just don't make this weird." And then he clapped my shoulder like we were buddies and headed toward the elevators. I didn't follow him. I told myself it was nothing. A stressed-out coworker, a long day, a weird comment. But a few minutes later, in my room, when I opened my laptop to send the final implementation notes to the client, I saw a new notification in our company's access portal, an automated log entry from the identity system. Privileged access request initiated. Requester R. Marlowe Target. Client environment. Staging bridge. Approval required. E. Carter Ryan's name. My approval. I stared at it until my eyes went dry, because I knew exactly what he was trying to do. I was the one assigned as the technical lead, explainable enough for the client and paranoid enough for security. My role wasn't glamorous, but it was powerful in a quiet way. I controlled the keys, not literal keys, permissions, temporary escalation, VPN route changes, audit flags, the boring stuff nobody respects until something goes wrong. And Ryan hated that. He'd been brought in as business liaison, the guy who could smooth over executive personalities and talk in confident sentences without actually saying anything. He was good at it. People trusted him because he was loud and easy, but he wanted the win on this project, the visibility, the internal credit, the promotion that was already being whispered about, and I had the paper trail. I declined the request, left a note in the system, short, neutral, professional. Not authorized without client approval. Discuss tomorrow. Then I closed the laptop and tried to sleep. Less than an hour later, he was trying to break into my room. Now he stood there in the doorway, breathing hard, the hall light carving his outline. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't wearing a mask. He looked like himself, wrinkled shirt, bare forearms, eyes a little too bright. And that made it worse, because it meant he didn't think he'd face consequences. "Are you insane?" I said. His gaze flicked past me into the room like he was scanning for something. My laptop, my bag, my phone. "I need you to fix what you did," he said. "I didn't do anything." "You declined it," he snapped, like the word tasted bitter. "You embarrassed me. You made it look like I don't have authority." "You don't," I said, still keeping my voice flat. "Not for that." He stepped forward. I stepped back. Not because I was scared of him physically. Ryan wasn't a fighter, but because I understood something in that moment that I hadn't understood earlier. This wasn't about access. This was about control. "You're not the only person who can approve things," he said. "You're acting like you're special." I almost laughed, but it wouldn't have been humor. It would have been disbelief. "Ryan," I said, "you kicked down a hotel door at 3 a.m. He looked at the broken frame like he'd only just noticed the damage, and then his face hardened. "Security isn't going to do anything," he said. "You know that. We're here on company business." That was the second cold thing in my chest, realizing he'd already calculated the system, already decided it would protect him. I reached for my phone slowly and held it up where he could see. "I'm calling the front desk," I said. He didn't back away. He lifted his chin like he was daring me. "Go ahead," he said. "Tell them your coworker got confused. Tell them you're overtired. Tell them whatever you want. Tomorrow, you and I are still walking into that client site together." I hit the call button anyway. The front desk answered with sleepy politeness. I said my room number. I said my door had been forced. I said I needed security. Ryan's eyes moved again past my shoulder, toward the desk where my laptop sat. That's when I understood what he really wanted. Not an argument. Not an apology. My machine. My access token was clipped inside the laptop sleeve. A little hardware key that generated the second factor for privileged actions. Without it, he couldn't escalate anything even if he got someone else to approve. With it, he could pretend to be me long enough to do damage, and then he'd have the audacity to act shocked when the logs pointed back. My stomach tightened. I shifted so my body blocked his line of sight, and I kept my voice calm on the phone while my mind started running faster than my mouth. Security arrived in under 3 minutes. 2 uniformed staff with radios, one holding a flashlight like it was a weapon. They saw the broken door and their posture changed immediately. "What happened?" one of them asked. Ryan stepped in with a story already loaded. "Miscommunication," he said quickly. "We're colleagues. I thought this was my room. Stop," I said, and my own voice surprised me. Not loud, just firm. The guard looked between us. I pointed at the doorframe. He didn't think this was his room. He said my name before it opened. Ryan's eyes flashed, just a flicker. The guard asked for IDs. Ryan produced his. I produced mine. They separated us. They radioed for a supervisor. And as I stood there, barefoot on the carpet, watching Ryan argue with a hotel security guard like he could outmuscle reality with confidence, I realized I had a choice. I could turn this into a scene, raise my voice, demand police, burn the whole trip down in one night. Or I could do what I'd been trained to do for years in corporate environments, where the loudest person often gets protected. I could document, stay calm, and build a case that didn't require anyone to believe me. So I asked the supervisor, politely, for an incident report number. I asked them to photograph the door damage. I asked them to list Ryan's name as the involved party. Ryan stared at me like he couldn't understand why I wasn't yelling, because yelling would have made it emotional. And emotion is easy to dismiss. Paper is not. They moved me to another room down the hall. New key card, new door. A manager apologized and promised repairs. Ryan wasn't removed from the hotel. They didn't handcuff him. Nobody dragged him away. Instead, he walked past me with a tight smile, like he'd won something just by staying upright. As soon as my new door closed, I checked my laptop sleeve. The hardware token was still there, clipped, where it should be. But when I opened my Access app on my phone, I saw another alert. Fresh timestamp minutes ago. Multiple failed login attempts detected. Source, unknown device. Location, hotel network. And then a third notification, the kind you only see when someone is getting impatient. New access request initiated. Requester, R. Marlowe. Target, client environment, production bridge. Approval required, E. Carter. He wasn't backing off. He was escalating. And the scariest part wasn't that he wanted into the client environment. It was that he was desperate enough to break a door to get it. I sat on the edge of the bed in the new room, staring at my phone, and I didn't feel angry yet. I felt clear. Because at that moment, I finally understood the shape of the problem. Ryan didn't just want credit. He wanted leverage. And if I didn't handle it the right way, he was going to make sure I looked like the unstable one, while he walked away clean. So I took a breath, opened the system logs, and started making copies. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the new room with my laptop open, the access portal on one screen, and the hotel incident number on a sticky note beside my phone, watching the audit feed like it was a heart monitor. At 3:19 a.m., the failed login stopped. At 3:22 a.m., Ryan's second access request was canceled. By him. Not denied. Not timed out. Canceled. Which meant he got what he came for, or he realized he couldn't. And when you work long enough around ambitious people, you learn the difference between frustrated and strategic retreat. At 6:05 a.m., I went downstairs, not to get coffee, to get paperwork. The night manager was tired but professional. She printed the incident report, attached photos of the door frame, and gave me a repair estimate that made my stomach tighten. She also confirmed something that mattered more than the splinters. The hallway camera caught Ryan outside my room. Clear face, clear timestamp, no wrong room, no confusion. I asked for a copy. She said they don't release footage directly without law enforcement, but she could note in the report that footage existed and had been preserved. So I made sure that line was in writing with her name on it before I left the desk. Then I did the part nobody likes doing on a client trip. I emailed my manager, Mark. Subject line, hotel incident, urgent. 3 bullet points. No emotion, no adjectives. Coworker forced entry attempt into my assigned room at 3:07 a.m. Hotel security responded, incident report attached. Footage preserved. Multiple failed log-in attempts against privileged system occurred from hotel network during incident window. I attached the PDF, included the incident number, and added one sentence that was purely operational. I'm rotating my credentials and restricting approvals until we assess exposure. That should have been a normal reaction. Standard incident response. Protect the client. Protect the company. Mark called me 10 minutes later, not to ask if I was okay, to ask if I'd made a scene. Ethan, he said, voice low, like the real problem was the noise. We're on a tight delivery. Don't turn this into a thing. It already is a thing, I said. He broke the door. Mark exhaled like I was being dramatic. Hotel stuff happens. He was probably... He said my name before the door opened. Silence. A short one. The kind that means he heard me, but he didn't want to accept the implication. Just keep it contained, he finally said. We'll handle internally. That phrase, handle internally, has ended more truth than lies. We went to the client site at 8. Badge in, laptops out, conference room with the same stale pastries and the same glass walls that make every meeting feel like a performance. Ryan arrived like nothing happened. Fresh shirt, perfect hair, a coffee in hand like he'd slept 8 hours. He greeted the client lead with that effortless warmth that made people relax around him. Then he looked at me and smiled like we shared a private joke. As soon as the client stepped out to grab someone from security, Ryan leaned in close enough that only I could hear. "Wild night," he murmured. "You're really going to do this?" "Do what?" I kept my eyes on my laptop. "Pretend I'm a threat." His smile didn't move. "You know how this looks? It looks like you kicked down a door." His jaw tightened for half a second, then it loosened again, back into charm. "Okay," he said softly. "Then let's be adults. Approve the access. We get the deploy done. After that, we can talk." There it was. Not apology, not accountability. A transaction. I didn't argue. I didn't lecture. I just opened the request history and watched the timestamps. Because while Ryan was busy polishing his story, I was matching patterns. Those failed logins from the hotel network, the identity platform didn't give me a name, but it did give me something better. Device fingerprints and IP ranges. Same device signature hit my account, then hit the shared admin panel we used for the client's staging environment, then hit our internal file share. 3 doors, same hand. And the last attempt happened at 3:10 a.m., 3 minutes after he started ramming my hotel door. He wasn't panicking, he was multitasking. The client's security lead walked in at 8:34, introduced herself, and asked a simple question that always makes people uncomfortable. "Can you confirm," she said, "that only authorized personnel have access to production bridge, and that any access escalation is approved per our policy?" Ryan jumped in immediately. "Absolutely. We follow your change control to the letter." He said it with confidence, like the sentence itself was protection. I looked at the access portal, and then at her. "I can confirm the policy," I said, "but I'm tightening the workflow today. No exceptions." Ryan turned his head toward me slowly, like I'd spoken out of turn. The security lead nodded once, appreciative. "Good. We've had incidents with vendors in the past. We prefer strict." Ryan forced a laugh. "Ethan's very thorough." I didn't react. During the first break, I stepped into an empty office, called our corporate security hotline, and logged a formal report. I didn't frame it as a personal conflict. I framed it as a client data protection issue, because that's what it was. I sent them the hotel incident report number and confirmation that footage was preserved, the access log showing the escalation attempts and failed logins, the business justification for immediate access restriction. Then I did what Mark should have thanked me for. I rotated my credentials. I invalidated every active token. I forced re-auth across the privileged group. I updated the approval policies so that any request touching production bridge required 2 approvals, mine and the client's security contact, rather than a single internal click. It wasn't revenge, it was governance, and it was completely within my scope as the assigned technical owner. Ryan didn't know I'd changed the rules yet. He found out at 11:12 a.m., because at 11:12 he submitted a new request. Same target, bigger scope, higher risk. And instead of routing quietly to me, it auto-forwarded to the client's security lead for co-approval, right in the middle of a meeting. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Her expression shifted, subtle, professional, but immediate. "Ryan," she said calmly, "why are you requesting production bridge access? That isn't aligned with what you described earlier." The room went silent in that way. Only corporate rooms can go silent. Polite faces, frozen hands. Everyone pretending they're not watching someone's career wobble. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. I kept my expression neutral because the truth didn't need my emotion to land. "That request shouldn't have," he started, but he couldn't finish the sentence without admitting what he was trying to do. The security lead didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She just asked for an explanation and waited. And Ryan, who always had words, didn't have the right ones. That was the first moment I felt something like relief. Not because he was punished. Because for the first time, the room was operating on facts, not personality. Ryan finally swallowed and said, "Miscommunication. I'll withdraw it." He canceled it right there. The meeting moved on. People spoke again. Laptops clicked. Someone made a joke to reset the air. But Ryan didn't look at me for the rest of the hour. At lunch, Mark pulled me aside near the elevators. His voice was tight. "You embarrassed him in front of the client?" "I protected the client," I said. "You escalated without telling me." "I told you this morning," I replied. "You told me to keep it contained." Mark's eyes hardened like I'd trapped him in his own words. "Just don't make enemies," he said. I almost laughed, but I didn't, because I wasn't the one making enemies. I was the one noticing them. Back at my desk, a new notification slid onto my screen. An internal calendar invite I hadn't accepted. Quick sync. Ryan, Mark, Ethan, 2:30 p.m. No agenda, no notes. And Ryan had added someone else. HR business partner. Optional. I stared at the invite for a long second because I understood the move. He wasn't trying to get access anymore. He was trying to get ahead of the story. And then, as if to confirm it, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You want to play compliance? Fine. I've got receipts too." But that was just the beginning. At 2:29 p.m., I walked into that quick sync with one goal. Don't let this become a personality fight, because that's where people like Ryan win. They don't win on facts. They win on tone, on concern, on the way they can make a room feel like you're the problem for insisting reality exists. The conference room was one of those glass fishbowls at the end of the hall. Mark was already inside, laptop open, posture stiff. HR, Lindsay, sat with a notepad and the kind of neutral face that says she's here to minimize liability, not to take sides. Ryan arrived last. He walked in calm, almost relaxed, like we were meeting about a slide deck. He even smiled at Lindsay. "Thanks for jumping on," he said. "I just want to clear the air." He sat down across from me, folded his hands, and started with the oldest trick in the workplace, concern. "Ethan," he said, voice smooth, "I'm genuinely worried about you. You seemed off today. The way you spoke to the client's security lead, the way you escalated procedures without aligning with the team, it feels impulsive." Mark nodded slightly like he'd already agreed before the meeting started. I didn't interrupt. I let him talk. He kept going, building a narrative that sounded reasonable if you hadn't lived it. "I knocked," he said. "You didn't answer. I thought something was wrong. I pushed the door harder than I should have. I admit that. But I wasn't trying to break in. I was trying to check on you. And then you took it personal." He said it like the door had simply fallen apart out of sympathy. Lindsay wrote something down. Mark stared at his screen. Ryan glanced at me. "So before this spirals, I think we should agree. No more unilateral process changes, and no more implying misconduct to the client." That last part was the point. He wanted the client to never hear the word attempt again. I took a breath and spoke slowly. "Lindsay," I said, "can I confirm something? Is this a fact-finding meeting or a performance conversation?" She looked up. "Fact-finding, we're documenting concerns." "Good," I said, "because I have documentation too." Ryan's smile tightened, just a millimeter. I slid my laptop forward, not dramatically, not like a courtroom, just enough that Lindsay could see the screen. "I sent Mark the hotel incident report this morning," I said. "It includes time stamps, security response, and confirmation that hallway footage exists and was preserved. The report also states Ryan addressed me by name before the door opened." Ryan's eyes flicked to Mark like you showed her that. Mark didn't move. I continued. "Second," I said, "during the same window, my identity system flagged repeated failed logins against my account from the hotel network. The device fingerprint then attempted access to the client admin panel and our internal file share." Lindsay's pen paused mid-air. Ryan's face stayed calm, but I saw his throat work as he swallowed. "That could have been anyone on the hotel Wi-Fi," he said quickly. "You can't pin that on me." I'm not pinning it on you, I said. I'm stating sequence. Door forced at 3:07. Failed logins spike between 3:07 and 3:10. Those are facts. Mark finally looked up. Ethan, you're making a lot of assumptions. I'm not, I said. That's why I filed a report with corporate security. They can correlate device identifiers, not us. Ryan leaned back and smiled again, but now it looked strained. So you called security on me, he said softly, after I checked on you. That's extreme. Lindsay's voice stayed even. Ryan, did you force the door? Ryan lifted his hands. I pushed, harder than I should have. I admitted that. And did you request production access? Lindsay asked. Ryan shook his head. I withdrew it. You requested it, she clarified, then withdrew. Ryan's jaw clenched. Yes. Lindsay wrote again. Mark rubbed his temple like he wanted the whole thing to disappear. Ryan turned to Mark with a sigh, like, see what I mean? I don't want this to blow up the engagement, Ryan said. We're in front of a sensitive client. If Ethan keeps acting like a gatekeeper, we're going to lose trust. Maybe we should temporarily transfer approvals to someone else so he can reset. There it was. He wasn't here to clear the air. He was here to take my keys. And he was trying to do it with HR in the room so it looked responsible. I didn't argue with him. I didn't defend my personality. I just asked one question that forced Lindsay to think like Risk. Lindsay, I said, if you remove the technical owner from approvals during an active client deployment, after a forced entry incident, and identity alerts, what does that look like in an audit? The room went quiet again. Because the answer was obvious, it looks like we ignored the warning signs. Mark shifted in his seat. We're not removing anything, he said quickly. We're just considering options, Ryan finished for him. I looked at Ryan, calm, direct. If you were checking on me, I said, why didn't you call? Why didn't you text? Why didn't you go to the front desk and ask for a wellness check? Ryan's smile held for half a second, then it faltered, because there was no good answer that didn't admit intent. He tried anyway. I panicked, he said. I thought you were ignoring me because you were angry. I wanted to talk face to face. At 3 a.m, Lindsay said quietly. Ryan's eyes cut to her, irritated for the first time. Mark jumped in, voice managerial. Okay, let's get solutions. We can't keep operating like this. That's when my phone buzzed. An email from the client's security lead. Subject: access governance concern. My stomach tightened as I opened it. Short, precise. She wrote that she'd received a call from someone at our company that morning. Someone who said my tightened approvals were unnecessary and that I was overreacting, and asked if the client could override Ethan's restrictions so the business team can proceed. No names in the email, but I knew exactly who it was, and more importantly, so did she. I looked up from the screen and met Ryan's eyes. He lifted his eyebrows in a way that said, "What?" I turned the laptop slightly so Lindsay could see the email. Someone called the client, I said, to undermine the controls. Today. Mark's face drained of color. Who did that? Ryan leaned forward, palms up, innocent. Are you accusing me now? He asked, still calm, still smooth. I didn't accuse, I just answered with something true. I don't have to, I said. The client will tell us who called, and corporate security will correlate device access. That was the moment Ryan stopped performing concern. His eyes hardened, and his voice dropped, low enough that only the room could hear, not the hallway. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, he said. I held his gaze. No, I said. You did. When you decided a door was easier than an email. Lindsay closed her notebook slowly. Okay, she said. This is now a formal security matter. Mark, I need you to pause any role or approval changes until we get findings. Ryan's jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't argue with HR saying the word formal. Mark nodded, tense. Fine. Ryan stood up, forcing his smile back into place. Sure, whatever process you need. He walked out first, and for the first time all day, I felt something crack inside me. Not fear. Clarity. Because I realized something simple. Ryan wasn't trying to get access anymore. He was trying to erase me as the witness. That night, back at the hotel, I found a printed envelope slid under my new door. No stamp, no hotel letterhead. Just my name, handwritten. Inside was a single page, a screenshot of a Slack message thread from months earlier. Me joking with a coworker about how Ryan was a slippery politician in a suit. And below it, typed in clean black font, "If you want to go personal, we can go personal." I sat on the bed with that paper in my hands and finally felt the shift. Up until then, I'd been trying to protect the project, trying to protect the client, trying to keep my career intact. But in that moment, I understood the truth. Ryan wasn't going to stop until I either backed down or broke. So I did what I should have done from the beginning. I stopped thinking like an employee, and I started thinking like an investigator. I didn't bring the envelope to Mark. I brought it to corporate security, not as drama, as evidence. Because once someone starts sliding threats under your door, you stop treating it like workplace tension, and you start treating it like what it is: coercion tied to access. By 7:15 a.m., I was on a call with an investigator from our security team. Calm voice, short questions, the kind of person who doesn't care who's charismatic, only who's lying. I forwarded 3 things in one thread: the hotel incident report number and footage preserved line, the client email, about someone trying to override controls, a photo of the envelope and the note inside. Then I did the rewire I'd been holding back. Not revenge, not sabotage, containment. I pushed an emergency change in our identity system. Ryan's account moved to a watch policy. Every privileged action required step-up auth and created a real-time alert production bridge. Requests now triggered dual approval, plus client security acknowledgement. Any access attempt from the hotel Wi-Fi range required reauth and got logged with full device fingerprinting. All audit logs streamed to our SIEM with a do not suppress tag. In plain terms, Ryan could still do his normal job, but if he tried to touch anything he shouldn't, the system would scream. At 9:03 a.m., it screamed. A red banner popped up on my screen. Privileged access attempt blocked. User, R. Marlowe. Target, client prod bridge. Reason, step-up required. Policy denied action. Alert sent to corporate security, plus client security. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something colder, because he wasn't trying to talk anymore. He was trying to force an outcome before anyone could stop him. 5 minutes later, Mark called me. "Did you change something?" he asked, already irritated. "I tightened approvals," I said. "Exactly what I told you yesterday." Mark lowered his voice. "Ryan says you're locking the team out and making us look uncooperative." I kept my tone even. If Ryan needs production access, he can explain the business justification to the client's security lead. In writing. Mark exhaled. "You're being difficult." And then my phone buzzed again. Another alert. File share access. Sensitive directory queried. User, R. Marlowe. Result. Allowed, read only, canary token triggered. He'd gone fishing, not for notes, for something he could weaponize. That was when the chaos actually started. Because corporate security didn't wait for a weekly meeting. They moved like a fire alarm. At 10:11 a.m., the investigator called me back. "Do you have eyes on Ryan right now?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "He's on site." "Good," he said. "Do not confront. Keep operating normally. We're initiating a preservation request with HR and legal. If he attempts exfiltration, we need clean telemetry." I hung up and walked back into the conference room like nothing happened. Ryan was there, laughing with a client manager like he'd never touched a door in his life. When he saw me, his smile stayed, but his eyes changed, sharp, measuring. He leaned in as the client talked, voice low. "Whatever game you're playing," he murmured, You're going to regret it. I didn't react. I looked right past him. Because I'd made a decision the night he broke the frame. I wasn't going to win this with volume. I was going to win it with structure. At 11:40 a.m., the client's security lead requested a quick huddle. Just her, me, and Ryan. No pastries, no small talk. She closed the door and said, "We've now received 2 access requests from you, Ryan, that don't match the scope we agreed. And today we received an automated alert that a blocked attempt was made against production." Ryan laughed like it was a misunderstanding. "That must be Ethan's controls. He's being overly cautious." She didn't move. "Ethan's controls align with our contract." Ryan's smile slipped. "Then I want it in writing that your delays won't impact delivery. Because this is becoming unreasonable." She nodded once. "We can do that. Also, our phone system logs calls. Someone from your company asked us to override Ethan this morning. That's not acceptable." Ryan blinked. "Who called you?" She held his gaze. "We'll provide the record to your legal team." Ryan looked at me like he wanted to burn a hole through my face. I didn't give him anything back. No smirk, no flare, just silence. Because silence is brutal when you're used to controlling the narrative. He stood up too fast. "This is ridiculous, explained." She cut him off, not harsh, final. "Ryan, step out. I need to talk to Ethan about operational continuity." Ryan froze. For 1 second, he looked like he might argue with the client's security lead. Then he remembered where he was. He left. The moment the door shut, she turned to me. "Are you safe?" That question hit harder than anything else that week. I didn't say yes immediately. I said what was true. "He forced my hotel door at 3 a.m., I said, "and he's attempting access outside scope." She nodded, already decided. Our policy is simple. If a vendor rep exhibits threatening behavior and is linked to unauthorized access attempts, they are removed from the engagement. I felt the first real release in my chest since that night. Not victory. Relief that someone outside our corporate bubble was treating this like reality. At 12:30 p.m., Ryan was called into a room with Mark and HR. At 12:37 p.m., he came out pale. At 12:41 p.m., his badge stopped opening client doors. He stood in the hallway staring at the reader, like it was broken. Then he looked up and saw me across the glass, and for the first time, he didn't smile. He walked toward me fast, jaw tight, hands clenched like he wanted to do something stupid. I didn't step back. I didn't raise my voice. I simply pulled my phone out, unlocked it, and held it where he could see the screen. Corporate security. On-site call in progress. Client security. Preserving footage. Pause call, logs. Ryan stopped 2 feet away. His eyes flicked to the phone, then to my face. "You think you're untouchable," he hissed. I kept my voice flat. "No, I think you are." He stared at me a second longer, then walked away. Not because he'd calmed down. Because he'd realized the hallway wasn't private anymore. By late afternoon, corporate security requested device preservation from HR, laptop imaging, access token inventory, account review, standard when an incident crosses from behavior into data risk. Ryan tried one last move. At 6:18 p.m., my screen lit up. Privilege request initiated. Requester: R. Marlowe. Target: emergency break glass access. Justification: Ethan unavailable. Mark approved. The request hit the new workflow. It didn't go to me. It went to corporate security and the client's security lead. And the system didn't just log it. It recorded the device fingerprint, the network, the timestamp, and the approval chain attempt. I stared at the alert and felt something shift again, an ugly kind of clarity. Because this wasn't him trying to finish work. This was him trying to create a paper trail that made it look like Mark told him to do it. So when it exploded, he could point at someone else. I forwarded the alert to the investigator without a single comment. 2 minutes later, I got a reply. "We have enough." That night, the hotel was quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet you get right before consequences land. I walked into my room, set my phone on the nightstand, and tried to breathe like a normal person. Then the screen lit up one more time. Not an alert. A calendar invite. Mandatory meeting, legal, HR, corporate security, 8 a.m. And beneath it, a single line in the notes field. Client requests removal and formal explanation. Evidence will be reviewed. I stared at that line until my eyes burned, because the next morning wasn't going to be about who felt offended. It was going to be about what the logs said, and logs don't care how charming you are. At 8 a.m., the meeting wasn't in a conference room. It was on video with cameras off, voices flat, and titles that carried weight. Legal, HR, corporate security, and one extra line that made my stomach drop the moment I saw it. Client security, external participant. Huh? Mark joined late. Ryan wasn't there. That told me two things immediately. This wasn't mediation. Someone had already decided the outcome depended on evidence, not opinions. The corporate security investigator spoke first. Ethan, we're going to walk through a timeline, he said. Stick to facts. If you don't know something, say you don't know. I said, understood, and placed my hands flat on the desk so they wouldn't shake. He started with the hotel incident. Door forced at 3:07 a.m. Hotel security responded. Incident report exists. Footage preserved. The client security lead confirmed it calmly. We've been provided the preservation notice from the hotel. HR asked me one question that sounded gentle, but wasn't. Did you feel threatened? I could have answered like a victim. Instead, I answered like a professional describing risk. I felt my ability to protect the client environment was being pressured through intimidation, I said, and the timing matches credential attacks and repeated access requests. A pause, the kind where someone takes that sentence and measures it for legal clarity. Then corporate security moved to the logs. They shared a screen, not my screen, not Ryan's, their screen, and what they displayed was the part I couldn't fabricate even if I wanted to. Device correlation. At 3:08 a.m., the investigator said, failed logins hit Ethan's account from a device fingerprint we can attribute to Ryan's corporate laptop. My throat tightened. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sick, because I'd known. But hearing it stated in a room with legal made it real in a way my own suspicion never could. The investigator continued. Same device fingerprint attempted access to client staging admin panel, internal file share, sensitive directory production bridge escalation flow. We also have a canary token trigger on the sensitive directory query. Legal asked. Exfiltration? Attempted, corporate security answered. No successful download detected, but the intent is clear. Then the client security lead spoke again, still calm, still controlled. We also have call records from our phone system, she said. At 9:17 a.m., Ryan Marlowe called my direct line and requested we override Ethan's governance controls because, quote, Ethan is overreacting and slowing delivery. We have the recording. Nobody spoke for a second, not even Mark. Then HR asked the question that decides careers. Was Mark involved in that call? The client security lead didn't hesitate. No, Mark did not contact us. Ryan did. I heard Mark inhale through his nose like he'd just realized he'd been standing next to a fire in a room full of gasoline. Corporate security turned to the last piece, the break glass request. They showed the request log, the justification text, Ethan unavailable, Mark approved, and then they showed the metadata. It was initiated from Ryan's device, the investigator said, from the hotel network, after he'd been notified of a preservation request. Legal's voice went colder, so he attempted to create a paper trail after being told not to. Yes, corporate security said. That's how it reads. HR didn't ask me how I felt after that. They asked something else. Ethan, did you rewire access in a way that impacted production delivery? I answered with one sentence because I'd learned the hard way that extra words create angles. I tightened controls to align with client policy and contract. Delivery remained on schedule. The client's security lead confirmed. Delivery remained on schedule. That was the moment my shoulders dropped for the first time in days, because the story could no longer be twisted into Ethan's difficult. It had become Ryan's unsafe. Legal concluded with the only language that matters in corporate settings. Given the evidence, coercive behavior, unauthorized access attempts, misrepresentation to a client, and attempted creation of a false approval chain, we are proceeding with termination for cause and notifying the client of corrective actions. Mark finally spoke, voice thin. So, what do we tell the team? Legal replied, minimum necessary. We do not speculate. We state that Ryan is no longer with the company and that access governance has been reinforced. Then HR asked me, do you need time off? That question hit me like the first quiet breath after being underwater. I said, not right now. Because what I wanted in that moment wasn't time off. It was closure, and I was finally getting it. At 11:40 a.m., I received the email. Short, clinical. Ryan Marlowe is no longer employed by the company. No explanation, no apology, no poetic justice. Just a fact. But an hour later, another email came, this time from the client security lead, directly to me. Subject, thank you. She didn't write a speech. She wrote one line that carried more weight than all of Mark's keep it contained. You protected our environment when it would have been easier to look away. I stared at that sentence longer than I should have, because it wasn't about pride. It was about relief that I hadn't become the scapegoat in someone else's panic. That night, the hotel was quiet again for real. No footsteps outside my door, no late-night calls, no threats in envelopes. I packed slowly, like my body still expected the next problem to appear. And while I folded my clothes, my phone buzzed one more time. A text from Mark. We're going to debrief Monday. Keep your statements consistent. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down, because for a week I'd watched managers try to manage perception while I managed risk. And now that the evidence was public inside the company, Mark wanted to control the story again. Not for truth, for optics. I opened my laptop and drafted 2 emails, one to legal, documenting that I would cooperate fully and would not discuss details outside formal channels, and one to myself, saved in a personal folder, containing the timeline, the incident report number, and the names of everyone who had confirmed facts. Not because I wanted revenge, because I'd learned the lesson Ryan tried to teach me with a broken door. If someone is willing to force an entry at 3 a.m. to get what they want, they'll force a narrative at 9 a.m. to survive. The next Monday, I walked into the office and nobody said his name. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't apologize for doubting me. They just looked away with that corporate discomfort people wear when they realize they were wrong. But admitting it would cost them status. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their sympathy. I needed one thing, to know that when the moment came, I didn't become small. I didn't swing. I didn't scream. I stayed calm. I made copies. I tightened the rules. And I let the systems do what they were built to do. Because the truth doesn't need a confrontation. It needs a record. And once there's a record, the door only breaks one way.